Hey, good morning, church. I pray that you're having a blessed week and this video finds you well. Well, we are just over the halfway point of our Pursuing His Presence devotional. And this week we looked at the theme of deliverance. So if you've been reading along with us, you've read through the journey of Israel in which God delivered them through the Red Sea and ultimately conquering their enemies, the Egyptians, behind them by collapsing the Red Sea over them. From that point, God continues to reveal how He longs to take care of His chosen people. And He does this through a multitude of miracles. Israel comes to a place and they see that there's water, but it's bitter. And so they ask God for new water through Moses. And so God purifies the water. When they hunger, God rains down bread and quail from heaven. They get to a place in which it's a desert land and there's no water to be found. And they begin to grumble and get upset at Moses, saying, "Why in the world are we out here?" And Moses ultimately, through obedience to God, is able to bring forth water from the rock. Now in this, Israel comes to this question and they say, is God with us or not? We look at that and we say, how in the world could you ask such a question after God has shown His deliverance in dire circumstances time and time again? Well, Paul brings up this question in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10. He encourages the church in Corinth to think about how Israel responded to God's deliverance. He encourages them to not be unaware in the same way that Israel had seen the deliverance of God, and yet they were not able to taste of the fullness of its fruit and go into the promised land. God actually found most of them in which he was not well pleased, and they were laid low in the wilderness, meaning they couldn't see the fullness of what was promised. Now, Paul encourages the church in Corinth that those were examples for us. And so what is our takeaway from this? Well, in the same way that God delivered them, God has delivered us. He's delivered us from sin. He's delivered us from death. And ultimately, we should remember the great power that God has delivered us through His Son, Jesus Christ. And that should produce in us a life of pure morality and devotion to God. That we ought not be idolaters or walk in immorality or to begin to grumble in the way that Israel did when things don't go well or in our way. In fact, Paul tells the church, listen, let him who thinks he stands take heed that he does not fall. In other words, be mindful of the way you think you stand on your own effort and merit. No, remember the fact that God has delivered you. And in fact, no temptation has overtaken you, but such is common to man. But God is faithful, who will always provide a way of escape, no matter the temptation. So when our sin attempts to try to bring about a desire, when our fleshly desire tries to entice us back into sin, we must remember that we have been delivered. So church, I want to encourage you this week to ask the question, how has God delivered me, specifically from sin? Yes, He's delivered us from sin and death, but specifically, what has God delivered you from? And remember that He's delivered you from that specific sin or those specific sins. Know that that power is still in you because God has given you of His Spirit. May we not neglect so great a deliverance in the same way Israel did, but trust that God provides a way out. I just want to remind you that God loves you, church, and that He has delivered you. May you walk in the fullness of that deliverance. I pray that you have a blessed week.